Good morning, metalheads, and Happy New Year. No, I'm probably about 9 days too late on the Happy New Year thing. I believe this is the first video of the new year for me. So anyway, today we're going to be doing my band review, worst to first, and a lot more on the band Metallica. I know this can be a very controversial issue for a lot of metalheads due to the fact of after the Black Album they were considered quote-unquote sellouts. A lot of people that I knew stopped listening to Metallica altogether, even the older records, because of the Black Album and their opinions on that. So a little bit of how I first got into Metallica. Like I said on my first video, Metallica was the first band to get me into metal. I was at a summer camp and heard a song that was being played there, and it just immediately captivated me as far as the sound and the aggression and the thundering power of the riffs on that song. I've been a Metallica fan ever since I heard them, probably back in like 1991, I believe it was. Still a band I would absolutely love to see live. I've seen many of their videos, their live concerts and stuff, and one thing you can still definitely say about Metallica is they're not like a lot of bands that are have been around as long as they have, that just kind of stand there and play their music and then maybe talk to the crowd every once in a while. They, you can honestly tell they enjoy playing the music that they play. They have fun on stage, and it's always about getting the crowd involved, and that's one of the main reasons I would definitely love to be able to go to a Metallica concert. So let's get right to it. To start off with, let's go into the worst to first. They have 10 studio albums that I am putting in here, so I'm not including the Garage Inc. or live stuff or EPs. So starting at number 9, and you'll understand why I'm starting at number 9, the album Saint Anger. Obviously a very controversial record that they hadn't put out a record in a few years, and they come out with this album. Very, very bad production, no guitar solos. James's voice sounds completely blown out. Just all in all, I probably gave the disc a total of 3 spins, and kind of gave up on it after that. But the one redeeming factor about that record is there are some really good riffs in there. There's some good guitar parts in there. The only problem is it sounds a little too cut and paste, and there's just not enough continuity within the songs for one full song to even really be a good song on that album. At number 8 is actually a combination, Load and Reload, and the reason why I put it at number 8, which is why there's not a 10 start off with Saint Anger, is because I feel like these two, they were originally meant to be a double album. They were just released a year apart. And aside from the fact that the two records, I really can't really put one ahead of the other. I think they're both equally good. I would say probably the one advantage that maybe Reload would have over Load is I think the production is just a little bit more glossy on Reload. I think there's still a little bit of a rough kind of production, not like say Injustice for All rough, but I think just the production is just a little bit better on Reload. These two albums, I think, showcase the band's musical ability as far as some of James's best riffs, his best personal lyrical content. I think that Kirk Hammett's solos are better. I think you really get to hear Jason Newsted really being Jason on the bass on these records. I think that Lars' drum fills are some of the best he's ever done. And one of the quotes that they had about doing these records, Lars was saying, you could only do so much playing fast as far as drum fills are concerned. And when you slow it down, you can really do a whole lot more. There's a lot more element for groove and being able to showcase the true abilities of each member of the band. Number 7, start off with what everybody considers the sellout record, the Black Album. Got them on radio and more MTV exposure and things like that. And, to me, I can understand because, for the old school fans, it wasn't, a thrashy record, even though there are some kind of thrashier songs on that, like Holier Than Thou, which is my favorite song on the album. But I think if you took the well overplayed Enter Sandman and the very, slow Nothing Else Matters, which actually was originally not even supposed to be on the album, it was just a song that James had wrote about his girlfriend at the time, and Lars being Lars, he usually has a way to influence James and convince him to put stuff on albums. That's how that song got on there. So I think actually if you take those two songs off, I think the whole sellout thing kind of goes away with that record. There's still some really great songs. Sad But True is a really heavy song. Wherever I May Roam, Struggle Within, God That Failed, Of Wolf and Man. I know my buddy Ron said it could be about a 4 or 5 song EP, but honestly I think if you take the 2 songs I had mentioned earlier off, I think it's a strong 10 song record. Number 6 for me was Death Magnetic. I feel that if you go stylistically for the band, it really could have been the record that went after And Justice for All, as far as still they come back with the thrash element again. Unforgiven 3, not a huge fan of that song, so that's why it's not a little bit higher. The production better than Saint Anger, not quite as good as say the Black Album. You do kind of have to struggle to hear Robbing the Bass, but you can hear it a whole lot better than you could on Saint Anger or Injustice. Songs like All Nightmare Long, one of my favorite songs on there. Judas Kiss has a couple of really great solos from Kirk on there. At number 5, and I can't quite put it any higher right now just because I feel maybe it's too soon, the new record, Hardwired to Self-Destruct. I absolutely love this record, and I loved Death Magnetic from the first time I heard it, and about the first 3 songs that they put out for this record, I knew immediately I was going to love it more than Death Magnetic. It's got, to me, every essential part of what is Metallica from the start of their career to now. It's got groove, it's got thrash, it's got guitar harmonies, it's got vocal harmonies, there's guitar melodies in there from Kirk, which there's a review by Sam Dunn from Banger Films where he said they finally brought back the guitar melody, which to me they had it in Death Magnetic, but maybe the production didn't allow you to maybe to hear it as well. Probably the one, if I'm going to say filler track maybe on the record, maybe Man Unkind. Other than that, all the rest of the songs to me are great. Even maybe Halo on Fire, probably actually my favorite song on the record. Definitely Confusion, a really good song, especially for these days when you talk about post-traumatic stress disorder from war veterans and things of that nature. I think really other than maybe Eyes of the Insane from Slayer off their Christ Illusion record, probably the best in-depth way to look at post-traumatic stress disorder and how real and how effective it really is. So now we get into the top 4, and we're going with the first 4 records, but I'm starting off with Kill 'Em All. I love this record. There's no filler in it. For me, there's no filler in the first 4 records, period. I just think that it wasn't, they progressed and got a lot more advanced in this record, but the one thing that keeps it higher up than, say, Megadeth's debut was on my discography is they will still play a majority of these songs live to this day, whereas the Megadeth record, it seems like he plays maybe like 1 or 2 of those songs from that record now, and for the most part it's just Mechanics, just because it's well known because of its association with the Four Horsemen, being the original version of the Four Horsemen before Metallica did some more spins on it. I know people would probably say, well, Kill 'Em All is really, Dave's record, and to be honest, on their first 2 records, he only co-wrote 6 songs. out of a total of 18. That's only a third of the songs. So you can say what you want about his influence on the band, sure, but as far as, writing all the Metallica songs on that first record, I mean, they were already had some of the songs written before he left the band. So, but, great songs like Seek and Destroy, Hit the Lights, Metal Militia, Four Horsemen, No Remorse, Phantom Lord, Whiplash. I mean, just a great record that still stands the test of time, and one of those original first thrash records out there. Number 4 is Master of Puppets. Great album, solid through and through. The title track, great song. Battery to me is a song I'd actually, if I ever got to see them live, I'd hope they would do that first. That would be the first song that they would lead off with. I think that's just a great little acoustic opening, and then they just slam you full on. Thing that should not be, just a real heavy, kind of like almost Ode to Sabbath type feel, with it being slowed down but just really crunchy and heavy. And the one thing I would probably take away from the Metallica Megadeth comparisons, I think the Megadeth was always faster, but I think Metallica just was heavier as far as the crunching and the riffs. Ride the Lightning comes in for me at number 2. Their instant progression from Kill 'Em All, not just production-wise, but songwriting-wise, I feel like they structured the songs a little bit more technical. They have kind of a tweak on how they did For Whom the Bell Tolls. You have kind of this melodic, I don't necessarily want to call it solo, but this lead guitar in between the verses, and then there's no really what you would call standard verse, chorus, solo, come back to the chorus again. It just ends with this, this heavy thundering pounding, and then Kirk just kind of goes off a little while on the guitar. You've got what could be considered maybe the first proper metal ballad, maybe, with Fade to Black. Definitely the first thrash ballad. And a lot of people think it's a suicide song or whatever, and really it's just about the band traveling before they made their second record. A lot of their gear was stolen, and James's Flying V that he had at the time, which is why from after the Kill 'Em All record, he didn't have a Flying V. He had the ESP Explorer. Great song. Creeping Death is my absolute favorite Metallica song. That's on the record. Escape is a very underrated song in my opinion. Great instrumental at the end, called Cthulhu. Trapped Under Ice, a great song. In my opinion, the top 3 that I have here, anybody could probably flip-flop them around, and I don't think anybody could really go wrong. That leaves me with the number 1 being And Justice for All. This was not only the first song, Harvest the Star, that I ever heard, it was also the very first Metallica album that I had a copy of, fully all the way through. And I think it's just got the best riffs that James has ever written. I think it's the heaviest record they've ever done. I think it's got a couple of songs in there that are probably the fastest songs he's ever done, Blackened being one of them. I really love that kind of mid-tempo thing, kind of after the second verse. Dyer's Eve, actually my favorite song on the record. That's just a fast, young, still angst record, song, excuse me. Definitely this record coming after the passing of Cliff Burton. I think they just had this kind of hell-bent mentality of a lot of anger and frustration, and what better way to put it out, at that point in their lives. The only way they really knew how to deal with a certain situation like that was just get balls to the wall heavy. Love that record. The only knock on it being the production, but I think kind of the mystique for that record for me really kind of is the production. Yeah, I would have loved to have heard Jason's bass a little bit more, but I think the production lends itself to being just that more heavier for the record. All right, the second thing I want to talk about when it comes to Metallica is the Napster issue. And everybody wanted to bash Metallica for saying, people stealing our songs online, and at this point, because of the Black Album, Load and Reload, they had actually started really making a lot of money for themselves, and calling themselves, people calling them greedy. And you got the little video of James hulking down and saying more money down with fans. And what people don't seem to understand is, first and foremost, Metallica's music is one, art, and two, their way of life. First of all, when it comes to art, if you were to make a painting or a sculpture or something, and somebody was figured out a way to copy it, to make it look exactly the way it was, and then give what you did your hardest job to make, and they just distribute it for everybody to have, that's wrong, because first of all, that's art that you worked hard to do. Second of all, that's your job. Third of all, there were a lot of artists that were with them on the Napster thing. They just didn't have the balls to put themselves up front, because they would tell, like Lars and James, well, I agree with you, but I can't go out there like that because that'll ruin my reputation. And another thing is, you think about the bands that are coming up today, like bands like Metallica. Yeah, they've got money, okay, they're set, but they also fought the fight for the new and up and coming bands, because if you've got a new band and your record's out, but somebody who likes your record enough to put it out there for somebody else to get, now all of a sudden it's getting all these downloads. They're not getting the money for this. A new band is not going to be able to make it on record sales. And I think that's one of the main reasons why bands today, especially metal, because metal's not a big, especially now, is because it's not as in the mainstream anymore. It's not in the forefront. They don't make as much money off record sales as say somebody like Lady Gaga or Katy Perry or whatever, because the teenagers don't have the kids aren't having the money, and their parents can say, okay, well, this is kind of safe, I'll buy you this or whatever. So it's hard for newer bands to come out and make it. So not only that, now you've got bands, especially in the metal community, that tour 2 or 3 years after a record. And back in the day, for us older fans, about every other year a band was coming out with a new record. They can't do that anymore, because just in order to survive and break even, you've got to play more shows, you've got to try and sell more merchandise and stuff like that. So you can say, well, they shit on their fans, they don't like their fans, they were being greedy. They flew the flag for metal music and metal musicians to be able to actually make a living doing something like this. I mean, you've got bands like Amon Amarth, who are a big name metal band, but they all hold regular jobs at home because record sales aren't that great, and they have to have an actual regular job to go to and then record and then kind of tour and be able to come back to those jobs. I mean, even an older band like Anvil, they weren't around during this whole download thing era now, but they've made 12 albums before there was any real exposure from the movie This Is Anvil. They held regular jobs. They would come to clubs that had 12 people in them. I mean, facing hard times where they'd go play a club and the owner refused to pay them, and they would try to pay them in like lasagna, and about to fist fight with the owner of the club or whatever. So, that I'm hoping that can at least shed a little light on it, as far as where to at least understand where they come from. Me personally, up until this most recent record, I've actually purchased every single Metallica album. So I kind of do feel that if my CDs were to get stolen, I could probably download those for free and be okay, because I have already paid for them, some of them a couple times. So that's the Napster thing. For number 2, the importance of Saint Anger. Listening to an interview with James Hetfield not too long ago, he kind of paints this picture of, you don't really get hardwired to self-destruct if there's no death magnetic. You don't really get death magnetic if there's no Saint Anger. Saint Anger was that refiguring out point of trying to get back to the roots at some point. They just had a lot of misguided on there. A lot of things like Deadline. At the time, they were a part of an actual record company that wasn't theirs now, which is Blackened Records, which the new record is on. They were given a deadline. James was in rehab for a year. And you can say, well, they're Metallica. They can tell the record company, go fuck off, and we'll have the album ready when we're ready. But even Metallica had to answer to somebody at that point in time. Also, I do think there's some good riff ideas in that album, and lyric content. It gave especially James the ability to really have a better way of reflecting on the issues that happen in his life, and come at it better from a better lyrical standpoint. So I think people need to understand, while the album, even I as a diehard Metallica fan don't like that record at all, there is an importance to that record. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is the Some Kind of Monster movie, which a lot of people bash, calling them pussies and having a counselor in there to talk to them and things of that nature. What people don't seem to understand is, being in a band, that being your primary job, there are a lot of things that go on, especially on the road. You're with each other 24/7. After the Black Album, they toured for 3 years. I mean, you're seeing each other more than you see your families. There's, especially between, James and Lars, which is shown a lot of times in the video, a lot of tension between those two, because they're the driving force of the band. They're the two egos for the most part, which is why, just to backtrack for a second, I felt that even if Mustaine had ever been able to stay in Metallica past, one record, it probably never would have worked anyway, because all three have these huge drives and these huge egos and would have wanted things their way. And, you get to see the actual human element of musicians. You have to understand that from square one, they're humans. They have emotions, they have problems, they have stresses, they can get depressed. They're not invincible. It's kind of like with sports heroes. When a sports hero is doing so well throughout his career, been playing 15 years, all of a sudden that 16th year he has that drop off and nobody saw it coming, and it's the fall of my hero. These guys, they have issues they have to deal with. And the thing that kind of spoke to me personally was James Hetfield. Maybe not necessarily his exact life experiences, but knowing that it's okay, especially as a man, to be able to realize, I've got issues, I can't do it on my own, I need to get it fixed, or not only am I going to suffer, my family's going to suffer, the job that I have is going to suffer. So people have to realize that, sometimes you need something to help you out. And if you think that any other band out there ever doesn't experience problems, they do. It was publicized more because Metallica wasn't afraid to show that side of themselves. They've never been afraid to show any kind of vulnerability or anything. They hide nothing from their fans, wanting to show them that they are just as real as the fans are. And also, that was only actually supposed to be about a 5-10 minute video as a promo for the Saint Anger record, and it turned out they had so much footage they just kind of put it out there as a movie. And I, for one, don't have an issue with it. I've watched it before. I've watched it a couple other times, and I think that I think it's pretty brilliant, actually, because and I'm not saying necessarily every band should do it, but I think for people who want to be like, well, when the news first came out, prior to Saint Anger even coming out, that James was entering rehab, people deal with real life shit. I mean, when your mom dies at an early age, and you've got this idea that everything that happens to you, is somebody else's fault, and you don't make the connection that some of the issues that you have are brought upon by yourself. Speaking of family problems, having a certain lifestyle on the road, bringing it home, not being acceptable, be able to have that same behavior at home, that can, go to anybody out there who, after work, maybe they go to the bar, have a few drinks, come home, and they're an asshole to their wife, or, whatever kind of situation. So I think people just need to understand that at the end of the day, musicians are just like anybody else. They're human. They put their pants on one leg at a time. They get tired just like everybody else. They get stressed like everybody else. And it actually probably is a wonder after watching that movie, as far as, we know, at least in this age of YouTube and stuff, they haven't had any kind of fist fight on stage. And also James learned, some things that, it's okay to have side projects, and it's not going to affect the main total of the band. I mean, there's plenty of musicians out there in big bands that have side projects, and even if the side project is, does pretty well, they're still able to coexist under their band, because at the end of the day, you're a musician, and maybe not all of your desires and your artistic frame of minds can be put out within a certain band. The other thing I would also like to talk about, and this will be the last point, is the Unforgiven trilogy. Now, while I'm not a huge fan of the third song, and really not of the second song, I really loved the first one. I think what it is able to show you is kind of like almost in that same breath as the Some Kind of Monster video, the evolution of a man's anger and where he was able to eventually place the right amount of blame. From the first Unforgiven, he's placing the blame on society, placing blame on parents and death and stuff like that. The second album, it comes more into some of the social relationships and stuff like that. And then in the third one on Death Magnetic, this is already post saying anger, and he's already figured some things out, and he's like, well, a lot of the big problem was myself. So it can be a teaching moment. I'm not saying that the latter two songs are all that great as far as songs I would want to hear live, or I would put on a playlist or anything. But for people like, oh, there was an Unforgiven 3, oh my God. Personally, I think it would be interesting on the next record if there was an Unforgiven 4, just to see if there's anything left to the story. I personally think probably the story is done, but then again, you never know. So anyway, there's my band review, worst to first, and much more on Metallica. Maybe I swayed your opinion on certain kind of hot topics. Maybe I didn't. Just maybe some food for thought on that. Would love to hear your opinions. Give your own worst to first. Tell your friends, subscribe, like, and hopefully within the next couple months, I got something really big coming up. It won't be too much before my next video, hopefully, but I've got something that's coming up that I think is really special to me. And I hope that it all comes through, but I don't want to spend a whole lot in detail about it. I don't want to jinx it. So anyway, this is the end of this video. Stay metal, and God bless.